The candles on my cake died. Silence held its breath. Then my father's voice, flat and rehearsed. Cut the room in half. Get out within 24 hours. They thought I would beg. They thought I was their quiet investment. Instead, I opened a folder I swore I would never touch, and the house itself chose sides. My name is Delaney Ward. I am 32 years old, and for 6 years, my life has revolved around my daughter, Nora. The party was a pathetic affair. Thrown in the dining room of the house I grew up in, the house I was now paying for, a few limp balloons, a store-bought cake with the wrong kind of frosting. It was my birthday, but the celebration was not for me. It was an obligation, a performance of family normalcy that choked on its own hypocrisy. Nora, 6 years old and bright as a new star, sat beside me, blissfully unaware. She was focused on the candles, her breath held in anticipation. Across the table, my mother, Margot, twisted a paper napkin in her lap, her face a carefully blank mask. Beside her, my twin sister, Brielle, and her husband, Carter, watched my father with an almost hungry expectation. My father, Graham Ward, stood up. He raised his glass of whiskey, the ice clinking. He smiled, but the expression never reached his eyes. Those eyes were cold, assessing, like a banker looking at a defaulted loan. "A toast," he announced. The room quieted. Nora looked up at him, smiling. "To Delaney," he said, his voice smooth. "On her 32nd birthday," he paused, letting the moment hang. "We've been thinking a lot about family lately, about values, about appearances." My stomach tightened. I knew this cadence. This was his courtroom voice, the one he used before delivering a killing blow. "And we've decided, as a family, that we can no longer enable a difficult situation, a single mom living under this roof. It's a family disgrace. Delaney, it's an embarrassment." The words hit the air and sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Nora's smile faltered. She looked at me, confused. I kept my expression neutral, my spine straight. I would not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Brielle's lips twitched into a smug smile, which she quickly hid behind her glass. Carter stared at me, his gaze openly triumphant. My mother just stared at the napkin she was systematically destroying, shredding it into tiny white pieces. Silence, absolute, ringing silence. Graham took a sip of his whiskey. "You have 24 hours to get out." He said it simply, as if discussing the weather. Not a request, an execution. Nora tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, what did Grandpa say?" I put my hand over hers, a small, steady pressure. I looked directly at my father. I did not raise my voice. I did not plead. "Nora," I said, my voice even, "let's go upstairs and get you ready for bed. We can have cake up there." "But the candles." "We'll light them again upstairs. A special wish, just for us." I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound was violent in the stillness. I scooped Nora up, her small, warm body, a shield against the ice in the room. I did not look at any of them again. I walked out of the dining room, my steps measured, and climbed the stairs. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel their victory. They thought I was broken. They thought I was fleeing. Once in Nora's room, I closed the door, muffling the sudden burst of low, triumphant conversation from downstairs. The first rule, the only rule I had lived by for 6 years, was locked in place. Nora would not be damaged by this. She would not absorb their poison. "Is Grandpa mad at me?" she whispered, her face buried in my neck. "No, baby, never." I kissed her hair. "Grandpa is just having a grown-up disagreement. It has nothing to do with you. You are perfect." We had our cake. I found a matchbook and lit the candles on her small slice. She blew them out. Her cheeks puffed, and wished for a puppy. I promised we would talk about it. The lie tasted like ash, but I smiled as if it were a possibility. As I tucked her in, I thought about the last 6 years. I had come back to this house, tail between my legs, with a newborn Nora after her father decided fatherhood was not for profit. The deal was simple, spoken aloud by Graham himself. You live here, you handle the finances, we'll help with the childcare. A simple deal, except handling the finances had morphed. It started with the utilities, then the property taxes, then the new roof 2 years ago, a staggering $20,000 expense that I paid in full for my design consultancy, Arcadia Atelier, then the HVAC system last winter, another $12,000, the kitchen remodel Brielle had demanded, which I had foolishly paid for as a family contribution. For 6 years, I had not been their tenant. I had been their benefactor. I had poured nearly 80% of my income into this ancestral home, this monument to their pride, while they told the neighbors I was a struggling single mother living on their charity. And now? Get out. Why? Why now? The question hammered at me as I read Nora a story about a brave knight. Why kick out the person paying the bills? It made no sense. Unless they no longer needed me to pay them. The little breadcrumbs I had ignored for months suddenly lined up in my mind. My mother, whisking a letter from Northlake Savings Bank off the kitchen counter 3 weeks ago, stuffing it into her apron pocket. Just junk mail, dear. Carter, my brother-in-law, talking too loudly on his phone in the driveway, mentioning a clean title and collateral. A glossy pamphlet for a rapid refinancing program left on the hall table, which vanished the moment I looked at it. Graham, in his office, slamming the phone down and muttering the word, quit claim. This was not a sudden burst of moral outrage. This was not about disgrace. This was a financial execution, timed, planned. Nora's breathing evened out. She was asleep, safe in her bubble of innocence. I stayed there for a long time, just watching her, anchoring myself to the one clean, true thing in my life. The anger was a cold, hard stone in my gut. They wanted me to panic. They wanted me to beg. They expected me to be on the phone right now, crying to a friend, figuring out which motel I could afford. They were wrong. I stood up and quietly walked to my own room, locking the door behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, the silence of the house thick and heavy. Downstairs, the television clicked on, a murmur of canned laughter. They were celebrating. I pulled out my phone. I did not call anyone. I opened a text thread to the one person I trusted, Zara Cole, my best friend from college, now one of the sharpest fraud and estate lawyers in the state. My fingers were steady on the screen. Need counsel, tonight. I hit send. I made myself a promise in that dark room. There would be no tears. There would be no shouting. There would be no begging. Crying was a waste of energy. Begging was giving them power. I would not spend the next 23 hours and 59 minutes packing boxes. I would spend it gathering evidence. I went to my closet, pushed aside my clothes, and felt for the false panel at the back. My grandfather, not Graham, had shown it to me. I pulled out a locked metal box. I did not need to open it yet. I already knew what was inside. My phone buzzed. A reply from Zara. On my way. 1 hour. Lock your door. Say nothing to anyone. I texted back. Already done. I thought about going downstairs, making Nora that hot cocoa I promised. The thought of walking back into that room, of seeing their faces, made my skin crawl. But the alternative, letting them think I was upstairs falling apart, was worse. I unlocked my door and went downstairs. They were all in the living room, watching a sitcom, Graham in his recliner, Margot on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow. Brielle and Carter cuddled together. They all looked up as I entered the kitchen, their faces tight with surprise. They were expecting suitcases, not a request for cocoa powder. "What are you still doing here?" Graham demanded, his voice impatient. I opened the pantry. "I'm making my daughter some hot cocoa. She had a hard time settling down. Your announcement was rather abrupt." "Delaney, this isn't a negotiation," Brielle said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Daddy is right. This has gone on too long. You need to stand on your own 2 feet." I looked at her, my twin. the one who had borrowed $5,000 from me last month for a spa retreat with Carter. I've been standing on my own 2 feet. Brielle, I said quietly, finding the cocoa. I've been standing so firmly, in fact, that I've been holding the rest of you up with me. Did you forget who paid for the new boiler? Carter snorted. You paid rent, Delaney. That's what adults do. Rent, I repeated. I found the milk and poured it into a saucepan. Is that what you're calling the $95,000 in capital improvements I've documented over the last 6 years? I must have missed the lease agreement. The room went silent. Graham sat forward in his chair. You watch your tone. This is my house. Is it? I asked, stirring the milk. That's a very interesting question. I did not wait for an answer. I poured the hot cocoa into Nora's favorite mug, the one with the foxes on it, and walked back upstairs. I heard Brielle hiss. She's bluffing. I went back to my room, locked the door, and set the untouched mug on my nightstand. The house eventually fell silent. The sitcom ended. The murmur of their voices stopped. One by one, their bedroom doors clicked shut. The house was finally still, holding its breath, waiting for the storm. I did not turn on the overhead light. I clicked on the small, focused beam of my desk lamp. The rest of the room stayed in shadow. I pulled out my black project notebook and a pen. This was how I ran my business, how I managed complex design projects, how I organized chaos into order. I wrote Project 14 Willow Row at the top of a clean page. They had given me 24 hours. They assumed I would use that time to retreat. I would use it to attack. I drew a line down the center of the page. On one side, I wrote assets. On the other, liabilities. My family went under the second column. The house, I was beginning to suspect, belonged under the first. My 24-hour counteroffensive had begun. I waited until 1 a.m. The house was submerged in that thick, pressurized silence that only happens before a storm, when the air itself feels heavy. I slipped out of my room, my feet bare on the cold hardwood floor, avoiding the third stair, the one that always groaned, a childhood skill retained for an adult war. My father's office door was unlocked. He was arrogant. He believed locks were only for people who had something to hide from equals. The room smelled of old paper and the faint, acrid sweetness of the cigars he smoked to celebrate his small victories. His desk was immaculate, but the bottom right drawer, the one containing his private finances, was locked. I scanned the built-in bookshelves. My eyes landed on the heavy, ornate silver frame holding a sepia-toned portrait of my great-grandmother. Graham was a creature of absolute, unvarying habit, one he mistook for discipline. I slid my fingers behind the frame. My fingertips brushed the small, cold piece of brass, the key. The lock clicked open, a sound so loud in the stillness it made my heart jump. I slid the drawer open. It was organized. Bank statements, old tax returns, investment portfolios, and right on top, a pristine, cream-colored envelope from Northlake Savings. The plastic window on the envelope was addressed to Ms. Delaney Ward. My blood did not just run cold, it froze. I did not bank at Northlake. I had never banked at Northlake. I used a letter opener from his desk to slit the envelope, my fingers trembling slightly. It was the first physical sign of weakness I had allowed myself, and it made me angry. Inside was not a letter, it was a contract. A home equity line of credit. The amount was $48,500. The loan was finalized and funded 6 weeks ago. I turned to the last page, the signature page. My name was there, scrawled in a familiar blue ink, Delaney Ward. It was a masterful forgery. It was brilliant. It had my precise slant, the open loop of my D, the exact way I sweep the I. But it was not my signature. The pressure of the pen was too even, too methodical. My signature was faster, sharper. This was studied. This was practiced. I stared at it, the violations so profound, so intimate, it stole my breath. I forced myself to read the disbursement details. The funds, of course, were not paid to me. They were paid directly, wired in a single lump sum, to a beneficiary listed as Maple and Finch Holdings, LLC. I took out my phone. I laid the document flat on the desk, under the focused beam of his green banker's lamp. I photographed every single page, ensuring the time and location data were embedded in the files. I sent the images to Zara in our secure message thread. My text was simple. Forgery likely, Shell LLC. They use my name to pull equity. My phone vibrated almost immediately. Zara, do not confront them. This is felony bank fraud. Delaney, he used your identity to borrow against an asset. Put it back. Are you safe? Safe, I typed back. I am still looking. Be careful. We need to know the next step. I put the HELOC contract back in its envelope, placed it exactly as I had found it, and relocked the drawer. I slid the key back behind the portrait. My motions fluid and silent, but I was not finished. The floor safe. It was hidden under the heavy Persian rug. The one he claimed was an heirloom. The combination was my mother's birthday. His predictability was not just a habit, it was a liability. The heavy steel door hissed open, more papers, property binders, and a thin manila folder labeled simply, 14 Willow Row, Contingency. My fingers brushed it. Inside was a quitclaim deed. It was a draft, not yet filed, but clearly prepared by a law firm I did not recognize. It was a simple, devastating document. It transferred all rights, title, and interest of the property at 14 Willow Row from Graham Ward to Brielle Ward Carter. I read the legal description. It was sloppy, referencing the property as acquired through familial inheritance. But the source of that inheritance was deliberately, purposefully vague. They were trying to erase the paper trail. They were trying to erase my great-grandfather. They were trying to erase me. This was the moment. I left his office, ensuring the rug was perfectly flat, its tassels straight, and returned to my own room. I turned the deadbolt. The small metallic snick was a comfort. I went to my closet, pushed aside the clothes I was supposed to be packing, and felt for the false panel at the back. My great-grandfather, Edison, had built it. He had shown it to me when I was 16. A woman, he'd said, must always have a place to keep the things that men will try to take. I pulled out my own metal lockbox. The key was on a chain around my neck, where it had been for the last 10 years, hidden under my shirt. I opened it. Inside, beneath Nora's first pair of shoes and my college diploma, was the document, the one Edison Ward had placed in my hand the day I left for university. Never trust sentiment, Delaney, he had told me, his hand paper-thin but his grip surprisingly strong. Only trust ink. I pulled out the long, heavy stock paper, bound in a faded blue legal cover, the original, notarized, and witnessed last will and testament of Edison Ward. I did not need to read it. I had memorized the clause years ago, but I read it anyway, my eyes tracing the typewritten words. And the real property located at 14 Willow Row, any town, being of sound mind, and having purchased said property by my own hand, and not by the hand or contribution of my son-in-law, Graham Ward, I do hereby bequeath said property in its entirety, without lien or encumbrance, to my sole and beloved granddaughter, Delaney Ward, upon her 30th birthday. My 30th birthday was 2 years ago. Sole, entirety. This house was not my father's to give away. It was not his to borrow against. It was, and for 2 years had legally been, mine. I photographed the will, every page, the raised notary's seal, the witness signatures. I sent it all to Zara. A few seconds passed, then my phone buzzed so hard it skittered on the desk. Zara. Holy shit, Delaney. This is the entire game. The HELOC is void. The quitclaim is void. He committed bank fraud using an asset he never owned in the first place. Me. He doesn't know I have this. He thinks I have the copy Edison gave him, which I'm sure he destroyed years ago. Zara, hold it. Do not reveal it. This is our ace. We play it last. I did not stop. Tucked beneath the will was my other file, the thick one, the one labeled Arcadia Atelier, Project Willow. I opened the accordion folder. 6 years of meticulous records. Riverlight renovations. $20,000. $150 for the new roof. Paid in full. HVAC solutions. $12,000. $480. Paid in full. Kitchen designs. Ink. $33,000. $700. Paid in full. Property tax statements for the last 6 years. All paid from my business account. I pulled out my laptop. I logged into my email. I searched my archived files for Riverlight. There it was, the entire thread, the estimates, the contracts, the change orders, the before and after photos I had taken for my own design portfolio. I searched my business bank account, Arcadia Atelier. I had been clever. I hadn't just paid for repairs. I had paid for the furnishings, the sofa they were sitting on tonight, the dining table they had insulted me at, the imported rugs, the custom window treatments, all of it. I had the invoices, the purchase orders, and the bank transfers showing that Arcadia Atelier had purchased and installed over $50,000 in assets for the 14 Willow Row project. I was not just the owner, I was the primary investor and the largest secured creditor. I photographed the summaries. I emailed the threads to Zara. I was not just building a defense, I was building an arsenal. I finally paused. My work complete. The house was settling again, groaning under its own weight, and then I heard it. A sound from downstairs. My room was directly above the kitchen. A voice. Brielle. She was whispering, but the old ventilation shafts carried the sound up the walls like a speaking tube. Has to be done. Carter, I don't care. You tell Miles he needs to push it. A pause. Carter's muffled, indistinct response. I don't know what she's doing, Brielle hissed, her voice sharp with impatience. She's probably upstairs crying and packing. It doesn't matter. As long as we get the closing done by Friday. Once the title changes, it's done. She can't do anything. Closing. Friday. Today was Tuesday night. That gave them less than 72 hours. This was not just about kicking me out. It was a race. They needed me gone. Needed the title clouded by their fraudulent quitclaim. So they could sell or leverage the house. Maple and Finch Holdings, the HELOC. Miles, the name Brielle just said. I texted Zara, my thumbs flying. Me. They're flipping it, or pledging title. They have a deadline. Closing is Friday. They mentioned someone named Miles. The reply came, got it. I'm running Maple and Finch right now. It's a ghost LLC. Registered 6 months ago. No assets. Just a registered agent in Delaware. This is a classic equity stripping scheme. They're using your father's perceived ownership to get cash, and they're using Brielle and Carter to secure the title before the bank realizes the loan is fraudulent. Me, what do I do now? Zara. Nothing. You go to sleep. You wake up tomorrow and you follow your normal routine. Make Nora breakfast. Let them think you are defeated. Let them think you are packing. We meet at 10 a.m., my office. And Delaney? Bring the will. Bring the original. I closed the laptop. I put the receipts back. I locked the metal box and returned it to the hidden panel in the closet. I looked at the cold, untouched mug of hot cocoa on my nightstand. They were not just thieves. They were amateurs. They were sloppy. I turned off my desk lamp. The investigation was over. The war was about to begin. I sat in the dark for a long time, the information settling like silt in a poisoned well. The forgery, the shell company, the quitclaim deed, the Friday deadline. This was not a rash decision made over a birthday cake. This was the final, clumsy move in a long conspiracy. My family had been planning my financial execution for months, maybe years. My mind drifted back 6 years, to the day I had returned to this house. I was 26, my design career just beginning to stabilize, and I was holding a 7-pound, impossibly perfect baby girl named Nora. Her father had vanished the second the pregnancy test showed positive. His parting words a cruel joke about his freedom. I was terrified, exhausted, and leaking milk through my shirt. Graham had opened the door, his face a mask of profound disappointment. Margot had ushered me in, her eyes darting to the neighbors' windows. as if my failure were contagious. The arrangement was proposed that night, delivered by Graham like a royal decree. "You can stay here," he had said, not looking at me, but at a spot on the wall above my head. "We will help with the child. You, in return, will handle your share. You will contribute to the household." I had agreed instantly, flooded with a desperate, humiliating gratitude. "Of course, Dad, anything. I'll cover the utilities, the groceries, whatever you need." "Good," he'd said. "It's settled." But the household was a moving target. The household became a bottomless, gaping void. Within 6 months, my share included the property taxes. By the first year, I was covering the homeowner's insurance. When the roof leaked, Graham had simply left the roofer's estimate, $20,000, on my pillow with a note. "This is a family asset. We all must protect it." I paid it. I paid for the new water heater. I paid for the landscaping. I paid for the new hardwood floors in the entryway. I paid and paid and paid, telling myself it was a fair exchange for the roof over my daughter's head, for the built-in babysitting that allowed me to build Arcadia Atelier from my laptop at the kitchen table. I had been a fool. I hadn't been paying rent. I had been financing their lives, blindfolded by my own misplaced guilt. And Brielle, my twin, she had watched it all with a simmering resentment I had mistaken for sisterly concern, while I was pulling all-nighters, balancing invoices and breastfeeding. Brielle was still playing the role of the helpless princess. She was the pretty one, the delicate one, the one who had married well. Or so she thought. She'd married Carter, a man whose ambition was a cheap suit he wore too tightly. I remembered, with a sickening clarity, a conversation 3 months ago. I'd found Brielle in the kitchen, crying over her credit card statement. "It's just so hard, Delaney," she'd wept. "Carter's trying to get this new real estate venture off the ground, but we're stretched so thin. You've always been the smart one, the successful one. It's not fair." I had written her a check for $5,000, telling myself it was a loan. I saw now what it was: seed money for her husband's scheme. Carter, he was the catalyst. He was the one who had been filling my father's head with poison. Graham, a man whose pride was his deepest flaw, could not stand that his disgraced single-mother daughter was out-earning him. He had spent his entire life cultivating the image of a successful patriarch, the Lord of 14 Willow Row. The fact that I, the family failure, was the one keeping his kingdom solvent was an indignity he could not bear. Carter must have presented Maple and Finch Holdings as the perfect solution, a private investment opportunity, he'd have called it. A way to leverage the house. Graham, restore your name as the provider, pull the equity out from under her. And Graham, desperate to restore his honor, to feel like the man in charge again, had agreed. He had agreed to steal from me. He had agreed to forge my name on a $48,000 loan, funneling the money directly into Carter's shell company. The quitclaim deed to Brielle was the next logical step. Secure the asset, cut me out, and leave me with nothing but the debt they had fraudulently acquired in my name. And my mother, Margot. My mind settled on her, and the anger was a different shape. It was not the sharp ice I felt for Graham or the hot pity I felt for Brielle. It was a dull, heavy ache of betrayal. Margot knew. She must have known. She, who balanced the checkbook and saw my checks clearing month after month. She, who had hidden the bank letter from me. She, who had sat at the dining room table tonight and shredded a napkin, a silent, complicit witness to her husband's cruelty. Her fear of scandal, of what the neighbors would think, was stronger than her love for me. She would rather sacrifice her daughter than her reputation. She had chosen to stand by, wringing her hands, while they painted me as the villain. That was the deepest cut. They had reversed the narrative, in their minds, and in the story they told the world. I was the freeloader. I was a freeloading single mom, the burden, the disgrace. They had convinced themselves that my contributions were nothing more than rent, while my presence was a stain on their good name. They had stolen my money, my security, and my identity, and then called me the thief. This was not an impulsive act of cruelty. This was a scheduled demolition. It had partners. This Miles person Brielle had mentioned, the contact for the closing, it had a timeline. It had a clear financial goal. They had given me 24 hours to disappear, not because of disgrace, but because I was a loose end they needed to tie up before their deal on Friday. I stood up and walked down the hall to Nora's room. The door was ajar, her unicorn nightlight casting a soft, pink glow. She was fast asleep, her small face peaceful, one arm thrown over her worn teddy bear. She was the only clean thing in this entire house. I leaned down and kissed her forehead, breathing in the smell of her hair. My promise to her was silent but absolute. They would not touch her. They would not take this house from her. I would not let their rot seep into her world. I would keep her life safe and calm, even if I had to burn theirs to the ground to do it. My phone vibrated on the desk in my room. A new message from Zara. Found our expert, Lydia Boone. She's the best handwriting analyst in the state. She's ex-forensic. She will be at the meeting tomorrow. Do not engage with them. Do not speak to them. We operate in silence until 10 a.m. I texted back, understood. My eyes fell on the gift box on my dresser, the one they had given me before the cake, before the execution. I had not even opened it. I pulled off the ribbon. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a silver watch. It was elegant, expensive, and completely impersonal. The card was signed, "With love, Mom and Dad." I turned it over in my hand. Love. What did that word even mean to them? Was this watch a parting gift? A conscience-salving token? Or was it, too, bought with the money they had stolen from me? I wondered if my mother's hand had trembled when she signed the card. I wondered if any of this was real. I picked up my phone and photographed the watch, the box, the card. More evidence for a file I was now labeling psychological damages. I walked back to my closet. I knelt and pulled back the carpet, revealing the small floor safe my great-grandfather had installed. Separate from the one in my closet, I placed the original, notarized will of Edison Ward inside its protective aluminum tube. I added the hard copies of the forged HELOC and my 6 years of improvement receipts. I closed the small, heavy door. I spun the combination lock. I heard the tumblers fall into place. It was not just a safe. It was a shield. It was the truth, made of steel and buried in the foundation. They thought I was packing a suitcase. I was loading a gun. I slept for exactly 4 hours, from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. When I woke, it was not to an alarm, but to a cold, singular focus. The rage from the night before had burned away, leaving something hard and clear in its place. I was not tired. I felt rested, sharp, like a tool honed for a specific purpose. I showered and dressed in the dark, not in sweats, not in clothes for packing. I put on a pair of dark trousers and a simple, cream-colored silk blouse, the kind of clothes I wore when I was closing a major design deal. I was not a victim preparing to flee. I was an executive preparing for a hostile takeover. I went downstairs at 5:30. The house was still, wrapped in a pre-dawn gray. I went to the kitchen. I did not start pulling boxes from the pantry. I pulled out the flour, the sugar, the butter, the eggs. I found the mixing bowl. I began to make pancakes from scratch. The sharp, rhythmic sound of the wire whisk hitting the ceramic bowl was the only sound in the house, a declaration that I was not going anywhere. Nora padded downstairs at 6:30, her hair a wild mess, dragging her teddy bear. "Mommy, is that pancakes?" "It is, baby," I smiled, pulling her close. "Chocolate chip? Your favorite? It's a special day." "Is it?" "It is." I kissed the top of her head. The smell of melting butter and browning pancakes began to fill the first floor. It was the scent of 1,000 lazy Saturday mornings, of family, of stability. It was an act of psychological warfare. I was claiming my territory with the most mundane weapon I had, domesticity. At 7:15, Graham thundered down the stairs. He was already in his golf polo, ready for his Wednesday game. He stopped dead at the entrance to the kitchen. He stared at the stack of golden pancakes on the counter, at the bottle of maple syrup, at me calmly flipping another. His face went from confusion to a deep, mottled red. He had expected to find me weeping over cardboard boxes, surrounded by bubble wrap. "What in the living hell do you think you are doing?" he roared. Nora, who had been happily setting out forks, flinched and dropped one. It clattered on the tile. I turned off the flame. I calmly bent, picked up the fork, and handed it back to Nora. Then I turned to my father. My voice was quiet, pleasant, as if he had merely asked me a question about the weather. "I am making my daughter breakfast, Dad." "I told you last night. You have 24 hours, he snarled, jabbing a finger toward me. "That clock started at 8 p.m. I want you, your child, and your things gone by tonight." I held his gaze. I did not blink. "I don't think so." "What did you say to me?" I repeated, placing a fresh pancake on Nora's plate. "I am eating breakfast, in my house." The words, "my house," landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. I had never, in 6 years, referred to it that way. It was always your house, or the house. This tiny deliberate shift in language knocked him completely off balance. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, searching for the daughter he thought he knew. The one who would crumble. She was gone. Margot rushed down the stairs, drawn by the sound of his voice. She was fully dressed, her makeup already perfectly applied, but she was vibrating with anxiety. "Graham, please," she hissed, her eyes darting to me and then to Nora. "Not in front of—" "This is ridiculous," Graham bellowed. "She's making pancakes, like it's just another day." "It is just another day. Mom," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. My mother's eyes locked on me. My absolute, unshakable calm was terrifying to her. Her hand trembled as she reached for her own mug, the one I had bought her. She spilled coffee over the white countertop, a dark, spreading stain. "Oh, dear," she whispered, grabbing a sponge, her movements frantic, scrubbing at the stain as if it were an indictment. "Just look at this mess." Brielle and Carter arrived at 8 a.m. They did not knock. They used their key. They walked in, bright and cheerful, clearly expecting to be greeted by the satisfying sight of my life in disarray. Instead, they found me sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, reading the news on my laptop, while Nora finished her breakfast. "Well," Brielle said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "look at you, just carrying on." "Good morning, Brielle, Carter," I said, not looking up. Carter smirked. "Denial is a tough stage, Delaney, but you really should get packing. We might even be able to spare you a few boxes. Right, babe?" I watched Brielle pull out her phone, her thumb tapping away. She angled it away from me, but not far enough. I saw her text to Carter, who was standing 2 feet away from her. "Champagne at noon. Miles says the deal is closing. This is it." They were arrogant, they were sloppy, and they were about to walk into a trap. At 8:45, I walked Nora to the door. "Okay, Peanut, Mrs. Keaton is waiting for you." Nora's face fell. "But are we leaving?" I knelt and took her small face in my hands. This was the most important performance of my life. "Absolutely not. You are going to Mrs. Keaton's house for a special, secret art project. She's got a brand new canvas just for you. You're going to paint that big glittery castle we saw in your book, and I will come get you this afternoon, and we will eat macaroni and cheese. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is changing. Mommy just has a boring, grown-up meeting today, okay?" I had called Mrs. Keaton, my 80-year-old neighbor, at dawn. I didn't have to explain much. She was a woman who had seen the world and had no love for Graham Ward. "You send that child over. Delaney," she'd said, her voice firm. "She's safe with me. You go and do what you have to do." I watched Nora skip across the lawn and disappear into the safety of Mrs. Keaton's house. The second that door clicked shut, the warmth drained from my face. I turned back into the house, The armor was on. My phone buzzed. A video call from Zara. I went to my bedroom and locked the door. "He's rattled," I said immediately. "Good." Zara's face was all business. "The package I overnighted. Did you get it from the mailbox?" "Right here," I said, holding up the small, nondescript cardboard box. "Excellent. Inside, you will find a button cam. It looks like a simple black shirt button. I want you to clip it to the placket of your blouse. The lens is in the center. It will record high-definition video of every single person you speak to. The second device is an audio recorder. Environmental. It looks like a small, gray stone. You need to plant that in the living room. That's where they'll congregate." I followed her instructions, my fingers surprisingly steady. I clipped the camera. It was invisible. I palmed the small, cool recording device. "They're all in there now," I said, whispering. "Perfect," Zara said. "Find a reason. Drop it. We need their candid conversation. Graham's plan to file a fraudulent affidavit of heirship is a gift. Delaney, that's a felony. That's jail time. He's cornered, so he's getting stupid. I'll be there at 12, with Lydia. Until then, you are a ghost. You listen, you record, but you do not engage. Got it?" "Got it." I went downstairs. Graham, Margot, and Brielle were in a tight, anxious huddle by the fireplace. Carter was pacing by the window. I walked straight into the room. They all stopped talking, looking up at me as if I'd grown a second head. "I think I left my laptop charger in here last night," I said, my voice airy. I walked toward the large, potted white orchid that sat on the coffee table. It was my mother's pride and joy. I bent down, pretending to look for the outlet behind the sofa. My hand brushed the pot, and I dropped the small, gray stone into the dense, dark moss at the base of the plant. It vanished instantly. "Oh, well," I sighed, standing up. "Must be in my office." I smiled brightly at them. "Sorry to interrupt." I walked out, the tiny camera on my chest capturing their stunned, suspicious faces. I went to the kitchen and sat down at the island, my laptop open. I was not working. I was listening. The entire house was a listening device. At 10:30 a.m., the landline rang. Graham snatched it up from the end table. "Hello? Miles? Yes. What's the news?" Graham's body went rigid. I could see him from where I sat. "What do you mean?" "A flag on the title." His voice was suddenly strained, high-pitched. "That's impossible. That property is clean. It's been in my family for 60 years. A long pause. Graham was gripping the phone so hard his knuckles were white. "What kind of ownership discrepancy?" he hissed. "I'm the sole owner. Yes, I can get that. A notarized affidavit? Of course, I can have it by 1 p.m. Is that fast enough?" He was sweating now. "Listen to me, Miles," he said, his voice dropping to a desperate plea. "This closing must happen by Friday. Our partners at Maple and Finch are fully leveraged. I need this to go through." He hung up the phone, his hand trembling. He didn't know I was watching. He didn't know I was recording. Margot rushed to his side. "Graham, what is it? What's wrong?" "The title company," he snapped, his voice a harsh whisper. "They're seeing some flag, some discrepancy in the ownership records. They won't clear the new loan or the transfer to Brielle without more." "Oh, God," Margot whispered, sinking onto the sofa. "It's the will. It's Edison's will. I told you. I always had a feeling." "I destroyed that will," Graham roared. "It does not exist. It is gone. There is no other copy." "Then what do we do?" Brielle asked, her voice shrill with panic. "We do exactly what Miles and Carter planned for," Graham said, regaining his composure. "It's a simple fix. If the quitclaim isn't strong enough, we use the affidavit of heirship. I go to a notary. I swear I am the sole legal heir to this property, that there are no other claimants. It's a formality. Miles says it will clear the flag immediately. I'll go right after our meeting at noon." Perjury. He was going to commit perjury. I typed a silent, rapid text to Zara. "He's on the hook. Graham just confirmed on tape that he's filing a fraudulent affidavit of heirship to get around the title flag. Margot confirmed he thinks the will is destroyed. They're all in on it. Zara's reply was 2 words. He's done. Brielle, seeing her dream of a quick payout evaporating, turned her panic onto me. She stalked into the kitchen. She needed to release her venom. She needed me to be the source of her problem. "You're just sitting there," she spat, "working, like you have a right to be." I kept my eyes on my screen. I do have that right. No, you don't," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You are a 32-year-old single mother living in her father's house. You are a disgrace, Delaney. Don't you have any shame at all? Why don't you just leave?" This was it. The moment. The camera was rolling. The audio was recording. I slowly looked up from my laptop, my expression unreadable. I let her accusations hang in the air, echoing in the quiet kitchen. Then I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk directly into a snare. "The only person here who should be ashamed, Brielle," I said, my voice perfectly level, "is the person who is so desperately afraid of the truth." Her face went white. The taunt died on her lips. She did not know what I knew, but she knew, in that instant, that I was no longer her victim. The grandfather clock in the entryway began to chime. 1, 2, 3. It struck 12, noon, right on cue. The doorbell rang. A flash of relief crossed Brielle's face. "That's Carter. He's got the champagne. He said the deal was closing." "No," I said, standing up from the stool. "I don't think that's who it is." I walked past her, past my panicked mother, past my sweating, furious father. I walked to the front door. I turned the knob. Standing on the porch was not Carter. It was Zara, dressed in a severe black suit, holding a thick leather briefcase. Beside her stood an older, formidable-looking woman with piercing, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "Delaney," Zara said, her voice projecting clearly into the silent house. "Thank you for seeing us. This is Lydia Boone. She's our forensic handwriting examiner. Shall we begin?" The grandfather clock in the hall struck its first chime, 12 o'clock. And right on cue, the doorbell rang. My family all looked at me. A silent, unified command. Go, answer it. Let the next phase of your eviction begin. I walked past them, my steps measured. My hand was steady on the heavy brass knob. The button camera on my blouse was aimed straight ahead. I pulled the door open. It was not Zara. It was Brielle and Carter, standing on my front porch in a grotesque tableau of triumph. Brielle was holding a magnum of Veuve Clicquot, the expensive kind, already sweating in the midday humidity. In her other hand, she clutched a cluster of silver mylar balloons, tied with a massive pink bow. They bobbed in the breeze, and I could read the glittering script, "New Beginnings." They were laughing, flushed with victory. Well, Carter boomed, pushing past me into the entryway without being invited. He clapped his hands together. "Look at this. Still here? I thought you'd be halfway to a motel by now. Delaney." "Carter, be nice," Brielle said, following him in, her voice a sickly sweet performance of pity. "She's grieving the loss of her free ride. It takes time to process." Carter just smirked and waved his phone in my face, angling the screen so I could see it clearly. It was an email from a mortgage broker. "Just wanted to show you this, Delaney, so you can finalize your planning. That's a pre-approval. $750,000. The bank loves us." He tapped the screen. "We're set to close on Friday, but our guy Miles says we might even be able to push it up to this afternoon if we can get the last few signatures. We're thinking new kitchen. Maybe knock out that wall." "Get out," Graham snarled, not at me, but at Carter. "Put that phone away. This isn't a celebration yet." "Oh, it is, Graham," Carter said, radiating an arrogance so profound it was almost impressive. He was a small man puffed up on a stolen victory. They all filed into the living room, their confidence palpable. They owned this space. I was just a ghost they hadn't managed to exorcise yet. "Please, come in," I said, my voice perfectly flat. They were already in. "I'll get some flutes," Brielle cheered. Setting the champagne bottle down on the coffee table I had paid for, she made a move toward the kitchen. "Don't bother," I said. "I don't have any." She stopped. "What? Of course you do. Mom, where are the—" "I can offer you water. Still or sparkling," I said. The rejection, so simple and so absolute, hung in the air, the refusal to participate in their party. Brielle's smile faltered. She lowered her hand, her face hardening from fake pity to undisguised irritation. Graham saw his opportunity. My calm was unnerving them, but the arrival of his co-conspirators had bolstered his resolve. He had his team assembled. He was ready for the final move. "Delaney," he commanded, his voice returning to the courtroom tone from last night. He stepped forward, holding a single, crisp sheet of paper. "Enough of this childish behavior. Your sister and Carter are here. This is a family matter, and we are resolving it now. You need to sign this." He thrust the paper at me. I took it. The room was silent. Even the balloons seemed to hold their breath. This was it, the moment of my surrender. My mother was watching. Her hands clenched so tight her knuckles were white. I read the document. It was titled, "Departure and Finalization Agreement." It sounded official. It sounded final. It was clearly designed to intimidate someone in a panic. The first paragraph was boilerplate legalese, a formal acknowledgement that I was vacating the premises within the next 24 hours. But the second paragraph— my eyes scanned the dense text. It was a word salad of "whereas" and "heretofore," but 3 words leaped out at me as if they were written in blood. Consent to encumber. This was not a departure form. It was a trap. It was a consent to encumber the property. It was a legal document that would give Graham, as the supposed owner, my explicit permission to pledge the house as collateral. This was the document he needed to bypass the title flag Miles had mentioned. This was what he was going to hand the notary, along with his fraudulent affidavit. He was trying to get me to retroactively approve the very theft he was committing. My heart was pounding, a cold, hard drumbeat against my ribs, but my face remained serene. I looked up, letting my gaze drift from Graham to Carter. "This is a very complex document," I said, my voice light, almost conversational. "It's very thorough. Who drafted it? Your regular attorney?" Graham opened his mouth, but Carter, brimming with the need to claim his genius, jumped right in. "It's just standard practice, Delaney," he said dismissively. "Our guy, Miles, at the title company, reviewed it. It's just a formality to clear the title for M&F's interest in the bridge loan. Standard procedure," he waved his hand. "Now, just sign it so we can all move on with our lives." Miles, M&F. He had said it, out loud, confirmed the entire conspiracy, right on camera. The audio recorder in the orchid pot was capturing every single word. I lowered the fraudulent paper to the coffee table, placing it right next to the mylar balloons. I smiled back at Carter. It was not a nice smile. "Thank you, Carter," I said. "That's very clarifying, but I think we should wait before we sign anything." Graham's face mottled with rage. "Wait? Wait for what? There is nothing to wait for. Sign the paper. Delaney?" "We're waiting for the guests of honor," I said. As if summoned by the words, the doorbell rang again. A solid, definitive, impatient ring. Everyone froze. Carter looked at Brielle, his confidence momentarily shaken. Is that Miles? I told him not to come here." "No," I said, standing up. "I don't think that's who it is." I walked to the front door, the eyes of my entire family boring into my back. I pulled it open. Zara stood on the threshold. She was dressed in a severe black pantsuit, a heavy leather briefcase in her hand. Beside her stood an older woman with iron gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that looked like they could see through steel. "Delaney," Zara said, her voice projecting with absolute authority. "Thank you for seeing us." They stepped inside, not waiting for an invitation. They moved with a purpose that immediately seized control of the room. Graham, seeing Zara, puffed himself up. He recognized his true adversary. "Miss Cole, I assume you're here as some sort of family counselor? I'll have to ask you to leave. This is a private family matter." Zara stopped in the center of the entryway. She turned slowly to face my father. She did not smile. "Mr. Ward," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I am not a family counselor. I am Delaney Ward's legal representative. My firm specializes in contested inheritance and felony financial fraud." She gestured to the woman beside her. "And this is Mrs. Lydia Boone. She is a court-certified, ex-forensic document examiner." The air in the room did not just get quiet. It became a vacuum. The power dynamic did not just shift. It shattered and reformed in an instant. The new beginnings balloons suddenly seemed obscene, mocking them. I saw Brielle, who had been holding her phone up, no doubt filming my downfall, quickly shove it, screen down, into her back pocket. Carter's smirk had vanished, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed confusion. I don't know what this circus is," Graham stammered, but his voice had lost all its bluster. "Fraud?" I walked past Zara, past Lydia. I walked to the coffee table. I pushed aside Brielle's celebratory champagne bottle. I reached into my own briefcase, which I had left by my chair. I pulled out 2 thick folders. I placed them on the table with a firm, definitive sound that echoed in the silence. "What is this?" Graham demanded, trying to reclaim his authority. I opened the first folder. I slid the high-resolution photograph of the forged signature across the table so it stopped directly in front of him. "This," I said, my voice level and cold, "is a copy of the $48,500 home equity line of credit you took out in my name 6 weeks ago, the one you funneled to Maple and Finch Holdings. Lydia will be analyzing the original shortly, but I think we both know what she will find." Graham recoiled, as if the paper were on fire. He physically staggered back a step. His eyes, wide with panic, darted to Carter, then back to me. That's a lie. That's absurd." "And this," I said, my voice dropping, "is this—" I opened the second folder. It was the certified copy of the last will and testament of Edison Ward. The original was in a safe deposit box. "The will you thought you destroyed," I said. "The will that states that this house, 14 Willow Row, its contents, and the land it sits on, has been my sole and legal property for the last 2 years." Graham's face, which had been red with anger, turned a waxy, terrifying gray. He looked from the will to my face. The realization hit him. Not just that he had lost, that he was caught. My mother, Margot, who had been vibrating in the corner like a plucked string, let out a small, strangled gasp, like a small animal being crushed. She reached out, as if to grab onto something, but missed the arm of the chair. She stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the fireplace mantel. She was hyperventilating, her eyes fixed on the will, the one document she had prayed, for 6 long years, did not exist. The party was over. Zara stepped forward, her heels clicking with sharp, deliberate precision on the hardwood floor. The button camera on my chest was aimed directly at her, but she was addressing my father. "Mr. Ward?" she began, her voice crisp and devoid of any emotion. "Let's be perfectly clear about what we are looking at. The document on your left is a $48,500 home equity line of credit, applied for and funded by Northlake Savings 6 weeks ago. It was, as you know, applied for in the name of Delaney Ward." She paused, letting the silence stretch. Carter had gone a sickly shade of gray. "The funds," Zara continued, "were not dispersed to Ms. Ward. They were wired directly to an LLC called Maple and Finch Holdings, which my office has identified as a Delaware shell corporation registered by Carter's holding company." Carter flinched as if he had been struck. "This loan was secured against this property, 14 Willow Row, which you claimed to the bank, under penalty of perjury, that you owned, and to finalize this loan, a signature was required. Ms. Ward's signature. She turned, her gaze falling on Lydia Boone. Mrs. Boone, if you would. Lydia stepped forward, pulling a pair of thin-rimmed glasses from her pocket. She looked at the photograph of the signature, then at my father, as if he were a specimen under a microscope. I will, of course, need to examine the original document, which we will be subpoenaing from the bank, Lydia said, her voice a dry, academic rasp. But based on this high-resolution image and the 24 known, verified exemplars of Ms. Ward's signature I have on file, I can state with over 99% certainty that the signature on this HELOC agreement is a forgery, a highly skilled one, I'll grant you, but a forgery nonetheless. Graham sputtered. That's not possible. That's conjecture. Is it Mr. Ward? Lydia asked, her eyes narrowing. The terminal loop on the Y in Delaney is consistently open in all her known signatures, a sign of fluid, rapid motion. This one is closed, hesitant, and drawn with a slight upward drift. Furthermore, the baseline pressure and the slant of the W in Ward are inconsistent with her established writing habits. This signature was drawn, not written. It was practiced. It was faked. This is ridiculous. A circus, Graham bellowed. But it was a desperate, hollow sound. And then, I said, my own voice cutting through his, there is the matter of the will. I tapped the second folder. The last will and testament of my great-grandfather, Edison Ward, the man who actually bought this house. I'm sure you remember it. Dad, the one you told my mother you destroyed. That's a copy, Carter suddenly shrieked. Finding his voice, he lunged forward, stabbing a shaking finger at the paper. That's just a copy. It's fake. You faked it. It's not worth anything. It's not filed. Ah, Zara said, a thin, dangerous smile touching her lips. I was hoping you would bring that up. You see, Mr. Carter, a notarized, original will does not need to be filed to be valid. It simply needs to be produced. Delaney? I reached back into my briefcase. I did not pull out a piece of paper. I pulled out a heavy, sealed, fireproof aluminum tube. I placed it on the coffee table with a heavy, metallic thunk that silenced the entire room. The original, I said, notarized by Edison's attorney, sealed, and placed in my hand by Edison himself 10 years ago. He told me to keep it safe. He told me there would be a day when men like you would try to take what was his. He was right. I unscrewed the cap. I slid the thick, original, perfectly preserved document from the tube. The raised, embossed notary seal was clearly visible from across the room. The ink of the signatures was faded but distinct. It was undeniable. It was absolute. Carter looked like he was going to be sick. He fell back onto the sofa, his pre-approval email forgotten, his champagne bottle a monument to his stupidity. And then, for the third time that day, the doorbell rang. The sound made everyone jump. Margot let out a small, terrified squeak. Who is that? Zara asked, her eyes on me. That, I said, would be my witness. I walked to the door and opened it. Mrs. Keaton stood on the porch, a plate of cookies in one hand and a small black USB flash drive in the other. Delaney, dear, she said, her voice loud and clear. I'm so sorry to interrupt your meeting. I just baked these for Nora, and I found that little bit of computer data you asked me to look for. Thank you, Mrs. Keaton, I said, accepting the drive. You're a lifesaver. Not at all, dear. My front porch camera catches everything. You know, I've been meaning to tell you. The resolution on this new system is just remarkable. She beamed at me. Then her eyes flicked past me, to the shattered family group in my living room. Her smile hardened. You have a good day. I closed the door. I walked back to the coffee table, holding the small black drive between my thumb and forefinger. What is that? Brielle whispered, her eyes wide. What did you do? You know, Brielle, I said, it's funny. You're so worried about what the neighbors think, but you never seem to worry about what they see. Zara handed me a small tablet from her briefcase. I plugged the USB drive into it. Mrs. Keaton's front porch camera. I explained to the room, has a perfect, unobstructed view of this driveway and excellent audio capture. I hit play. The screen lit up. It was footage from last night, time-stamped at 9:15 p.m., just after I had gone upstairs with Nora. The video was grainy, shot in night vision, but the figures were unmistakable. It showed Brielle and Carter, huddled by my father's car in the driveway. It showed Carter sliding a thick white envelope to Graham, who quickly pocketed it. The audio was faint, but the camera's microphone was sensitive. Brielle's voice, a sharp, conspiratorial hiss. "Just sign it, Dad. Miles said the affidavit is the only way. As long as we get it filed before the closing on Friday, it's done. She'll be gone, and it will be over." Then Carter's voice. "She won't do anything. She's a single mom. She's got no money. She'll be too busy packing to fight. By the time she figures it out, the title will be in Brielle's name. It's foolproof." I pressed pause. The image of the three of them, frozen in their conspiracy, hung in the silent room. Graham looked at the screen. He looked at the will. He looked at the forged HELOC. There was nowhere left to run. I did it for this family," he whispered, his voice cracking. It was the last, pathetic defense of a defeated man. "This house, the disgrace. I had to protect our name." "Family does not legalize felony forgery, Mr. Ward," Zara said, her voice like steel. "Family does not legalize bank fraud, and family does not legalize a conspiracy to steal an inheritance. And while we're on the subject of what I've done," I said, reaching for my third folder, "let's talk about what I've paid for." I dropped the file on the table. It was 3 inches thick. "This is a complete, itemized breakdown of every capital improvement made to this house in the last 6 years. The new roof, $20,150. The HVAC system, $12,480. The kitchen remodel Brielle demanded $33,700, all paid from my business account, Arcadia Atelier." I tossed the bank statements on top. Not to mention the property taxes, the insurance, the utilities, and over $50,000 in furnishings, which I purchased, as a designer, through my company. This house is not just my inheritance, Dad, it's my single largest investment. You were not just trying to steal my home, you were trying to steal my entire business." Zara stepped forward again, assuming her role as the closer. "So here is what happens now. As the sole, legal owner of this property, Ms. Ward is ordering you all to vacate the premises, immediately." "What?" Margot shrieked, finally finding her voice. "You can't! This is our home!" "It is not your home," Zara corrected her. "You are tenants at sufferance, and your tenancy is over. If you are not packed and gone within 24 hours, I will have the sheriff here to remove you for criminal trespass." "Delaney," Margot wept, her face collapsing. She lunged toward me, her hands outstretched. "Delaney, please, let's talk about this. In private, just us, just family." I took a step back. I looked at her, at the woman whose silence had co-signed every lie, every theft. "No, Mom," I said, my voice cold and final. "We are done with private. We are done with secrets. Everything stays on the table. Everything." Lydia Boone, who had been watching with quiet, professional detachment, stepped forward. "I will need to take these documents into evidence," she said, producing several large plastic evidence bags. She carefully placed the forged departure agreement in one. She looked at me. "The USB drive?" I handed it to her. She sealed it in another bag, signed the chain of custody label, and handed it to Zara. That was when Brielle finally broke. It was not a cry. It was a scream, a raw, guttural sound of pure, undiluted rage that had been festering for 30 years. "You!" she shrieked, and she pointed a shaking finger at me. "You always do this. You always win. You always had to be the smart one, the successful one, the one Edison loved." "Brielle, stop it," Carter said. grabbing her arm. "No!" She ripped her arm away. "He was supposed to give us money. Carter's investment, it went bad. We lost everything. The off-market deal, it was a scam." So that was it. The real, pathetic motive. "We needed this house," she screamed, her face contorted, tears and makeup streaming down her cheeks. "We needed the money from the loan. We were supposed to get it all. Sell the house and be free of this, free of you. You had to ruin it. You always ruin everything." She grabbed the magnum of champagne from the coffee table. For a second, I thought she was going to throw it at me. Instead, she turned and hurled it, with all her strength, at the large gilt-framed mirror above the fireplace, the one I had bought at an estate sale. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. The mirror exploded, and the New Beginnings balloons, caught in the crossfire, popped, one by one, like gunshots. Pop! 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 And then, silence. The shattering glass and the pop of the balloons echoed for a long second, then vanished, leaving a thick, heavy silence. Brielle was panting, her chest heaving, her face a mask of tear-streaked rage. The champagne and glass shards covered the hearth, a glittering ruin. My father, Graham, had collapsed into his recliner. He looked 20 years older, a gray, hollowed-out shell. Margot was weeping, a high, thin, whistling sound, her hands twisted in her lap. Carter just stared at the floor, the personification of pathetic defeat. Zara did not even flinch. She gave Brielle a look of cold, clinical disgust. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her entire demeanor sharpened. "Excuse me," she said. She turned her back on my family and walked to the entryway, her voice dropping to a clipped, professional murmur. "He is? You're certain? And Beacon Title is handling the escrow? I want the preliminary title report. Find the flag they mentioned, and pull the city zoning minutes from the last quarter. Now." She clicked off the phone and turned back. Lydia Boone was already snapping her briefcase shut. Her work here finished. "Delaney, Lydia, my office, now," Zara commanded. "You are not leaving!" Graham suddenly roared, finding a last pathetic scrap of his voice. "This is my house. You can't just—" "Mr. Ward," Zara said, her voice cutting through his. "You are a tenant, and you are being evicted. Your 24-hour notice begins now. You, your wife, your daughter, and Mr. Carter have until noon tomorrow to remove your personal effects. If you are still on this property at 12:01 p.m., the sheriff will remove you for criminal trespass. We are leaving. I suggest you start packing." She didn't wait for a reply. She nodded at me, and I grabbed my own briefcase. I walked past my weeping mother, past my shattered father, past my seething sister. I did not look at them. I did not say goodbye. I followed Zara and Lydia out the front door and did not look back. We were in Zara's car, pulling away from the curb, before I finally let out the breath I had been holding. My hands were shaking, a delayed reaction to the adrenaline. That, Lydia said from the back seat, was a textbook case, the video evidence, the forged document, the notarized will, and a full confession of motive. They are, as the kids say, done. "It's worse than that. Lydia," Zara said, her voice grim, her eyes on the road. "That was my associate. His name is Miles Rourke, the Miles they kept mentioning." "The contact from the title company," I said. "Not just a contact. Delaney. He's a senior officer at Beacon Title. But my associate just ran the corporate filings for Maple and Finch Holdings. Miles Rourke isn't just working with them. He's on the board. He is Maple and Finch." My mind spun. So, the title officer, the bank, and the LLC that got the money, they're all the same person? "It's a closed loop," Zara said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Rourke used your father's greed and Carter's stupidity to initiate a fraudulent loan against an asset he, as the title officer, was supposed to be vetting. He pushed the $48,000 HELOC through his own bank, paid the money to his own shell company, and was planning to use your father's fraudulent affidavit and the quitclaim to Brielle to wash the title and flip the house. Flip the house? I asked. It's a nice house, but all this risk, the felonies, it doesn't make sense for that amount. It does, Zara said. When you know what my associate just found. Her phone buzzed. She put it on speaker. Ken, you're on? Go. Zara, you were right on. A man's voice filled the car. I pulled the city planning agenda. It's not public knowledge yet, but it's in the minutes. The new light rail expansion. The proposed Willow Row station is going to be built 3 blocks from that address. A chill went through me. What? A leaked zoning map is already circulating in high-level developer circles, Ken continued. My contact estimates that any property within a half-mile radius of that new stop will double, if not triple, in value in the next 6 months. I finally understood. The urgency, the Friday deadline, the disgrace. This was never about Brielle's stupid investment, I whispered. That was just her cut. This was never about family pride. This was a professional, corrupt real estate deal. Exactly, Zara said. Rourke saw the zoning leak. He needed to acquire properties along that line before the news broke. He found Carter, a desperate, small-time fool. Carter identified your house as an easy target. He told your father he could be a partner in a big development deal, get a bridge loan to buy in. Graham, thinking he owned the house, agreed to let them use it as collateral. And Carter was the broker, I finished, the sickness rising in my throat. Bringing his father-in-law's asset to the table, he was getting a commission for selling out his own family. They get the HELOC, forge your name, then file the quitclaim to Brielle to cloud the title, Zara explained. Once it's in her name, Rourke has Maple and Finch buy it from her for a fraction of its future value, paying off the loan in the process. They all get a small payout, and Rourke walks away with a multi-million-dollar property before the boom hits. You were just a loose end he thought he could scare away in 24 hours. My quiet suburban street, it was all a lie. I was not just protecting my inheritance, I was standing in the way of a major land grab. We arrived at Zara's high-rise office. Lydia, thank you, Zara said as we got out. We'll need your sworn affidavit on the signature analysis by 3 p.m. You'll have it by 2. Lydia nodded and was gone. In Zara's office, she was all business. Okay, here's the plan. First, I am filing for an immediate temporary restraining order. It will name Graham, Margot, Brielle, Carter, Miles Rourke, Beacon Title, and Maple and Finch Holdings. It will freeze all activity, all sales, all transfers, and all credit lines associated with the title of 14 Willow Row, pending our hearing. Good, I said. Second, we need to cement your position. We have the will. Now I want to prove your financial stake, your capital improvements. You said you had the contractor? I pulled out my phone. Riverlight Renovations. The owner is Sal. He despised my father. He'll help. I made the call. Sal picked up on the second ring. Delaney, everything okay? Sal, I need a favor. Do you still have the files for the 14 Willow Row job? The roof and the kitchen? From 4 years ago and 2 years ago? Kidding? He laughed. That was one of my best. I use those pics in my portfolio. I've got every estimate, every change order, every paid invoice, and yeah, I've got the time-stamped digital photos, before, during, and after. Why? Can you email me that entire file, right now? And Sal, can you confirm that all your contracts and all your payments came from me, Delaney Ward, and my business, Arcadia Atelier? There was a pause. Is that old bastard? Is Graham giving you trouble? You have no idea, I said. The file will be in your inbox in 5 minutes, he said. And you let me know if you need me in court. I'll be happy to testify he tried to get me to pad the invoice and give him a 10% kickback. I told him to pound sand. Thank you. Sal? I hung up. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mrs. Keaton. Dear, I'm so sorry. I just remembered something else. That mother of yours. I heard her on her porch phone 2 days ago. I was in my garden. She was crying. She said, I don't care. Graham, you have to sign the affidavit before Thursday, or Miles said the whole thing falls apart. I thought it was odd. Hope it helps. I showed the text to Zara. Her eyes lit up. She heard Margot, Zara breathed. She's a co-conspirator. She knew about the affidavit. She wasn't a passive victim. She was an active participant in the cover-up. I thought about my mother's kitchen desk, her iPad. I think I know how to prove it, I said. We drove back. Zara parked a block away. You're sure they're gone? It's Wednesday, I said. Graham golfs. Brielle and Carter are probably at a bar. And my mother, she's at the hair salon, every Wednesday at 1:30, like clockwork. I still had my key. I let myself into the silent, shattered living room. The glass was still on the floor. I walked straight to the kitchen. My mother's iPad, unlocked. I opened her call history. There it was, dozens of calls. Not to Miles, but to a contact labeled Miles B. I tapped the contact. The number was for Miles Rourke at Beacon Title. She had been speaking to him directly, daily, for 2 weeks. I took a photo of the call log. I went to the orchid on the coffee table. The small, gray audio recorder was still there, nestled in the moss. I palmed it. I checked the recording. It was still active. I rewound the file to just after we left. I heard Brielle's voice, not screaming, but a low, desperate whine. Carter, shut up. Let me think. That USB drive. From the old lady. That's the only thing that proves we knew about the Friday deadline. The will. The will just proves she owns it. The video proves we plan to steal it. A pause. Then the sound of her dialing her phone. Delaney, pick up, you bitch! My phone, in my pocket, was silent. I had blocked her number. Voicemail, she hissed. Okay. Then I heard her leave the message that was, at this very second, sitting in my voicemail box. Delaney, it's me. Listen, you don't have to do this. We're family. That video, it was just talk. It doesn't mean anything. But I know you want to protect Nora. Think about her. I can get you money. A lot of money. More than that stupid house is worth. Just give me the USB drive. Give me the drive, and we can make this all go away. For Nora. She was trying to bribe me. She was trying to tamper with evidence. I saved the audio file from the recorder. I downloaded the voicemail from my phone. I sent both to Zara with the photo of my mother's call log. Me. She's offering a bribe for the USB. And Mom was talking to Miles daily. We have everything. Zara's reply was instant. We do. It's over. I stood in the wreckage of the living room. I looked at the broken glass, the popped balloons. This was the house Edison had left me. This was the house I had rebuilt. I walked out and locked the door behind me. I walked the block to Mrs. Keaton's house. I rang the bell. The door opened, and Nora ran out, her hands covered in paint, a huge, glittery castle painted on the canvas behind her. Mommy, look, I made a castle. It's for us. I swept her up into my arms, burying my face in her paint-scented hair. I held her so tightly. She was safe. She was untouched. She was the only thing that mattered. It's beautiful, Peanut, I whispered. It's the most beautiful castle I've ever seen. As I carried her home, I made one last call. Yes, hello? I'm calling from 14 Willow Row. I'm the owner, Delaney Ward. I need an emergency locksmith. I need every single lock on this property changed, immediately. They had until noon tomorrow, but as far as I was concerned, they were already gone. The house was already mine. By 3 p.m., the locksmith had finished. New, high-security deadbolts were on every door. The house at 14 Willow Row was a fortress, and for the first time, I was the one holding the only keys. Zara did not wait. She was a legal blitzkrieg. By 4 p.m., she had electronically filed the temporary restraining order. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression. It named everyone: Graham Ward, Margot Ward, Brielle Carter, Miles Rourke, Beacon Title, and Maple and Finch Holdings, LLC. She also filed a separate criminal complaint with the district attorney's office, citing felony forgery, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, and attempted fraudulent conveyance of real property. At 5 p.m., 2 uniformed police officers and a plainclothes detective arrived at my new front door. Zara had arranged it. They were not there to arrest anyone yet. They were there to serve the TROs and take possession of the evidence. I watched from the living room window as the officers walked across the street. My family was in the driveway, frantically trying to load a U-Haul trailer attached to Carter's SUV, a comical display of panicked incompetence. The lead officer handed Graham the papers. Graham refused to take them, letting them fall to the driveway gravel. The officer merely nodded, said, "You have been served," and turned to Margot, Brielle, and Carter, doing the same for each. The detective, a woman with a tired, intelligent face, then approached them with Lydia Boone's affidavit. She informed them that she was there to take possession of specific items related to an active fraud investigation, including the original forged HELOC contract and the fraudulent departure agreement Graham had tried to force me to sign. Graham, utterly broken, simply pointed to a box labeled "Office" sitting by the curb. The detective retrieved the documents. Then, she walked over to Brielle, who was standing frozen by the mailbox. "Ma'am, I also have a warrant for the original video file from a porch camera, which we have reason to believe you are in possession of." Brielle, her face white, handed over the USB drive. The detective sealed everything in evidence bags, had them sign the chain of custody, and left. The entire exchange was quiet, professional, and devastatingly public. The neighborhood was watching. Of course they were. This was the biggest drama on Willow Row in a decade. I saw Mrs. Keaton on her porch, nodding slowly. I saw others peering through their curtains. The rumors would be a wildfire by morning. I had to get ahead of it, not for me, but for Nora. I walked over to Mrs. Keaton's. I spoke to the Millers next door. I called the Patels. My message was the same, delivered in a calm, steady voice. "I am in a legal dispute with my family over the ownership of my home." I told them, "The police were involved to serve papers and collect evidence regarding a financial crime. It's an upsetting and complex situation, but it is being handled by the proper authorities. My only concern, my only request, is for Nora. She is 6 years old. She will be playing in the yard. She does not need to hear whispers or answer questions from anyone. I would be grateful, as your neighbor, if you would grant us that privacy." They all agreed immediately, their expressions shifting from curiosity to a fierce, protective sympathy. Mrs. Keaton patted my arm. "That child is safe here. Delaney, we'll make sure of it." The legal counteroffensive was already having its desired effect. At 9 a.m. the next morning, Thursday, Zara received an automated notification. Beacon Title had officially canceled the closing scheduled for Friday. The property was now legally toxic, flagged in the system as being under active litigation. This sent Miles Rourke into a flat spin. At 9:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a screenshot from an unknown number. It was Carter. He was, predictably, the first one to crack. The screenshot was of a text message from Miles. The text was frantic, riddled with typos. "Do not mention my name. Tell your wife to shut her mouth. You got that HELOC? Not me. You're on your own. This never happened." Below the screenshot, Carter had typed a pathetic, sniveling message to me. "Delaney, look, he's throwing us under the bus. It was all him. He and your dad. They cooked it up. Brielle and I. We just got caught in the middle. We'll give you anything. Just tell the DA it was Miles. Please, don't let him do this to us." He had just confessed to the conspiracy and delivered our primary target, Miles Rourke, on a silver platter. I forwarded the entire exchange to Zara. Me. "The rats are eating each other." Zara. "And they're sending us the receipts. I'm adding this to the file for the DA. Carter just became our star witness." A minute later, Zara sent me another message. "Check the Maple and Finch website." I typed the URL into my browser. The page was gone. In its place was a simple, stark error message. "This site can't be reached." They were scrubbing their online presence. Me. It's down. Zara. Doesn't matter. Ken pulled a cached copy of the entire site last night. We have the full list of their ghost LLCs and the original text promising guaranteed returns on select, off-market residential properties. They're not just fraudulent, they're stupid. The final siege came in waves of desperation. First, my mother. She appeared on my new front porch at noon, just as the U-Haul was pulling away. She must have had a spare key, because she tried it in the lock. It didn't work. She stared at the key, then at the door. In genuine, profound confusion, she rang the bell. I answered it, but I did not open the security screen. She stood on the other side, looking small and wrecked. "Delaney," she whispered, her voice raw from crying. You changed the locks." "Yes, I did." "Please," she begged, her hands pressed against the fine mesh of the screen, as if she were a prisoner. "Don't let this happen. Think of your father's reputation. Think of the family's dignity. This public spectacle. It's unseemly." "Dignity," I repeated. The word sounded foreign. "You're worried about dignity. You weren't worried about dignity when you stood by and let him call me a disgrace. You weren't worried about dignity when you hid the bank letters. And you certainly weren't worried about dignity when you were calling Miles Rourke every day to make sure the affidavit you knew was a lie was signed." Her face went white. She had no idea I knew. "You have 24 hours to undo this," she pleaded, tears starting anew. "Just tell the lawyers it was a misunderstanding. We can pay you back the loan. We can work something out." "You want to work something out?" I said, my voice as cold and hard as the new deadbolt. "Here's the arrangement. You write down everything, a full, notarized confession. You detail who came up with the plan, who forged the signature, who contacted Miles, and that you knew about the will all along. You do that, and I will ask Zara to present it to the DA as a sign of your cooperation." Her face crumpled. "A confession? Delaney? I can't. Your father—" "That's the only arrangement on the table, Mom," I said. "You're a co-conspirator. You're not a victim. You need to decide, right now, if your loyalty is to the man who dragged you into a felony, or to yourself. You have until the hearing. Goodbye." I closed the solid wood door on her sobs. Next was Brielle. She didn't come in person. She sent me an email 2 hours later. It was, of all things, an invoice. Subject: Proof of investment. "Delaney, I have been advised to send you this. This is the investment receipt for the $5,000 I put into the M&F partnership. As you can see, I am a victim here. 2. I was defrauded. I expect you to add my losses to your lawsuit. This is your fault for not telling anyone about the will." I stared at the attachment. It was a receipt of investment for Maple and Finch Holdings. It was laughably fake. The logo was pixelated. The typeface was Times New Roman. It looked like something she had made in Microsoft Word 5 minutes ago. I forwarded it to Zara, who forwarded it to Lydia Boone. Lydia's reply was almost instantaneous. "This is a public template. I found the exact one online in a 3-minute search." She just typed her name into the placeholder. "This is an admission of guilt, and a comically bad attempt to fabricate evidence. Tell your client. Well done." The last and final assault came at 8 p.m. My phone rang. It was my father's number. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. On the 5th call, I picked it up and set it to record. "Delaney," I said. There was a long pause. When he spoke, the voice was gone. The thunderous, arrogant courtroom bellow was gone. The ice-cold voice of the patriarch was gone. In its place was a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years. It was the voice of the man who had taught me to ride a bike. It was the voice of Dad. "Laney," he said, his voice thick. "My girl." What? What are you doing? This is your family." The manipulation was so transparent, so pathetic. It made me feel tired. "Don't," I said. "Don't use that voice. Not now." "But, baby, it's me," he pleaded. "It's just your dad. This is all a misunderstanding. Lawyers, police. This isn't us. Just come home. No. I mean, just let us come home. We'll sit at the kitchen table. We will fix this. Just the two of us. Just tell me what you want. I'll give you anything. Just call them off. Please. They're talking about prison. Lainey. The mask had slipped. The fear was raw. I held the phone, my own hand steady. I looked at Nora, asleep on the sofa, her face peaceful. I looked at the new, gleaming locks on my door. I will not be speaking with you. Dad, I said, my voice formal and final. Not at the kitchen table, not on the phone. The next time you and I will speak will be in a courtroom. It will be on the record, and you will be under oath. From now on, you can direct all your communication to my attorney. Goodbye, Graham. I hung up the phone before he could say another word. That night, I filed one last document, a formal petition for a temporary order of protection, granting me sole and exclusive use of the house and all its assets, while the criminal and civil cases proceeded. The neighborhood online forum was, as I had predicted, a dumpster fire of speculation. Did you see the U-Haul? Heard Graham lost his job. Someone said Delaney Ward kicked her own parents out. I logged on, I found the main thread, and I posted my one and only statement. To my neighbors on Willow Row, you may have seen the disruptive events at my home yesterday. This is a private, legal matter, not a family disagreement. My daughter and I are the victims of a complex financial crime, which is now being handled by the district attorney's office. The ownership of my home is not, and has never been, in question. Thank you for respecting our privacy as the legal process unfolds. Delaney Ward, 14, Willow Row. The post was measured, firm, and final. It gave them nothing, and it told them everything. The rumor mill went silent. That night, as I was tucking Nora into bed, she looked up at me, her eyes wide with the sixth sense all children have. Are Grandpa and Grandma mad at us, Mommy? Yes, baby, I think they are. She paused, her small hand clutching my shirt. Are we going to have to leave our house? I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. I looked at her, my daughter, the one person in the world who was clean and true. I kissed her forehead. No, Peanut, I said, my voice full of a certainty I had not felt a day before. We are never, ever leaving. This is not their house. This is our home. This is your home. She smiled, a sleepy, satisfied smile. Okay. She closed her eyes and, for the first time in 6 years, I felt like I was finally home, too. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. It was a preliminary hearing, not a full trial, but the room was packed. We were here for my temporary restraining order and the petition for exclusive use of the property. Zara sat beside me, a fortress of calm, professional focus. Across the aisle sat the ruins of my family. Graham, his face a pasty gray, stared at his hands. Margot, veiled in black as if attending a funeral, sat rigidly beside him, her eyes red and swollen. Brielle and Carter were at the far end, not touching, separated by a chasm of mutual blame. Their lawyer, a rumpled, overwhelmed man named Haynes, looked like he had drawn the shortest straw in his firm. Miles Rourke, Beacon Title, and Maple and Finch had their own high-priced corporate counsel, a shark in a $2,000 suit who looked at all of us like we were insects. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Elena Pham, peered down at us over her glasses. I have read the extensive preliminary filings. This is quite a domestic dispute. Counsel. Your Honor. Zara stood, her voice clear and precise. This is not a dispute. This is a confession. We are here to confirm the facts. First, the matter of ownership. She presented the original, notarized, and sealed will of Edison Ward. Your Honor, this is the original bequest, placing the property at 14 Willow Row in the sole and exclusive ownership of my client, Ms. Delaney Ward, upon her 30th birthday, an event which occurred 2 years ago. The judge examined the document, her eyes scanning the seals, The signatures. She nodded slowly. The document appears to be in perfect order. The county clerk's office confirms this will was filed by Mr. Edison Ward's executor upon his death 10 years ago, and its terms are clear. Preliminarily, Ms. Ward is the legal owner of the property. Graham let out a low, strangled sound. He had destroyed his own copy, believing it was the only one. He never imagined Edison had filed it officially and given me a personal, original copy. Next, Your Honor, Zara continued, the matter of the $48,500 home equity line of credit, taken out in Ms. Ward's name without her knowledge or consent. I call Mrs. Lydia Boone. Lydia took the stand. She was all academic precision. She laid out the blow-ups of my real signature next to the forgery. Your Honor, my analysis identified no fewer than 12 significant discrepancies between the known exemplars and the questioned signature on the loan agreement. Note the pressure on the downstrokes, the distinct hesitation in the Y loop, and the uncharacteristic hand tremor cycle. This is not a signature, it is a simulation, a forgery, and in my professional opinion, a very confident one. The shark for Beacon Title tried to object. Conjecture, Your Honor, this expert. Mrs. Boone is a court-certified forensic examiner with 30 years of experience, including 15 with the state, Judge Pham said, her voice dry. Her opinion is noted, and it is damning. Please continue, Ms. Cole. Thank you. Your Honor, I now present video evidence, time-stamped at 9:15 p.m. on the night of October 29th. Zara played the USB file from Mrs. Keaton's camera. The courtroom was silent, watching the grainy, night vision footage of Graham, Brielle, and Carter in my driveway. We heard Brielle's voice, sharp and clear. Get it filed before the closing on Friday. It's done. She'll be gone, and it will be over. The closing on Friday, Zara repeated. This phrase directly corroborates evidence from the defendant. Beacon Title. We call their representative, Mr. Shaw. A nervous man in a cheap suit, clearly a mid-level employee thrown to the wolves, took the stand. Zara was kind, but surgically precise. Mr. Shaw, she said, did Beacon Title receive documents related to a new loan and title transfer for 14 Willow Row last week? Yes, we did, he mumbled. And did your office flag that title? Yes, there was a discrepancy. A discrepancy, Zara said. Could you elaborate? The property was filed under the will of Edison Ward, showing a clear bequest to Delaney Ward, Shaw said, his voice gaining a bit of defensive strength. But the new loan application and a draft quitclaim deed were filed by Graham Ward, claiming sole ownership. The title was clouded. We couldn't proceed. So you stopped the loan? No. Our officer, Mr. Rourke, informed Mr. Ward that the flag could be resolved if he could provide an affidavit of heirship. An affidavit of heirship, Zara repeated, letting the words hang in the air. A sworn document stating he was the sole heir, in direct contradiction to the will you just mentioned. Did you receive such a document? We received a draft, Shaw said, sweating, prepared by Mr. Ward, but before it could be notarized or filed, we received Ms. Cole's temporary restraining order. We immediately canceled the closing and suspended Mr. Rourke, pending an internal investigation. The shark for Beacon Title shot up. Objection! Mr. Shaw is not speaking for the company. He is speaking as its representative under oath, Judge Pham snapped. Sit down. Zara was not finished. Your Honor, we have established the what. Now we address the why. The defendants were not just trying to steal a house. They were trying to secure an asset for a land grab. She put a new document on the projector. It was a complex, color-coded diagram. This, Your Honor, is the beneficial ownership structure of Maple and Finch Holdings, LLC, the shell company that received the $48,500. As you can see, Maple and Finch is owned by another LLC, Westgate Acquisitions, and the sole signatory on Westgate Acquisitions, Mr. Carter. All eyes went to Carter. He looked like he was going to throw up. "It wasn't me," he yelped from his chair. "It was Miles. It was all Miles." "Mr. Carter," the judge said, her voice booming, "you will be silent or I will have you removed." "I'd like to call Mr. Carter to the stand," Zara said quietly. Haynes, their lawyer, tried to stop it, but Carter, in his panic, wanted to talk. He wanted to blame someone else. He practically ran to the stand. "It was Miles Rourke," he said, before Zara could even ask a question. "He set it all up. He said it was a no-risk bridge loan. He said the house was Graham's." "Mr. Carter," Zara's voice was soothing, "did Mr. Rourke know you were trying to remove Ms. Ward from the house?" He knew. He said we had to. When my father-in-law's affidavit was flagged, I told him she'd never sign. She was getting suspicious." "And what was his response?" Carter's face crumpled. He knew he was trapped. He sent me an email." "The email you forwarded to my client?" Zara asked. "Yes," he whispered. "Please read Mr. Rourke's instructions to the court." Carter was crying now. Fat, silent tears. He wrote, "I don't care how you do it. Get her signature on the consent form. Tell her it's an eviction notice. I don't care. Force it under duress if you have to. Just get it done by Friday, or we all go down." "We all go down," Zara repeated. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. No further questions." Carter stumbled back to his seat. Brielle looked at him with a hatred so pure it was almost visible. "Your Honor," Zara said, "we have one final piece of testimony, the complicity of Mrs. Margot Ward." Margot looked up, terrified. "Mrs. Ward," Zara said, "you claimed you had no knowledge of this, that you were a victim of your husband's temper." "I was," Margot cried. "I am. I didn't know." "Then can you explain this?" Zara produced a photo, a small, handwritten note. "This was found in your kitchen desk. The handwriting is yours. It says, Edison Delaney, 14 Willow. You knew about the will, didn't you, Mrs. Ward?" Margot broke. She let out a wail that filled the courtroom. Yes, I knew. I always knew. I found it years ago, after Edison died. I told Graham, and he burned it. He told me it was a mistake, that the house was his. I was afraid. I didn't want to lose my home. I didn't want to face him." She had confessed to knowing about the will, to knowing her husband had destroyed it, to being complicit in the entire fraud for a decade. "Thank you, Mrs. Ward," Zara said gently. Judge Pham looked down at my family, her face a mask of cold fury. "Mr. Haynes, do your clients have anything to say in their defense?" Brielle stood up, shoving Haynes aside. "It was him!" she shrieked, pointing at Carter. "It was all him. He lost all our money. He pushed my father. He scammed us. I'm a victim. He's the criminal." "Objection," Zara said, her voice flat. "Ms. Carter is not a victim. She is a motive." She held up the small audio recorder from the orchid pot. "Your Honor, this is a recording from inside the house after I had left. It captures Ms. Carter's reaction when she realized she was caught. Permission to play the section where she admits her true motive?" The judge nodded. Zara pressed play. Brielle's voice, raw and full of hate, filled the room. "We needed this house. We needed the money from the loan. We were supposed to get it all, sell the house, and be free of this, free of you. You had to ruin it. You always ruin everything." Brielle sank back into her chair, her face white. Haynes put his head in his hands. Judge Pham looked at Graham, Margot, Brielle, and Carter. "This court finds that the evidence presented is overwhelming. The TRO is granted, effective immediately, the order of protection, granting Ms. Delaney Ward exclusive use and protection of the property at 14 Willow Row is also granted." She fixed them with a stare. "Furthermore, any attempt by any of you to contact, harass, or come within 500 feet of Ms. Ward or her daughter, Nora, will be considered criminal trespass and a violation of this order, and you will be arrested. Is that clear?" They all nodded, dumbly. Just as the judge was about to strike the gavel, a man in the back of the courtroom stood up. "Your Honor, forgive the interruption. Assistant District Attorney Frank Nunez. We have a brief announcement for the record." The judge nodded. "Mr. Nunez." "Thank you, Your Honor. Based on the evidence provided by Ms. Cole's office, including the confession of Mr. Carter and the internal documents from Beacon Title, the District Attorney's Office has, as of 10 minutes ago, unsealed an indictment against Mr. Miles Rourke. He was arrested at his office and is being charged with 2 counts of felony bank fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and evidence tampering." The shark for Beacon Title grabbed his briefcase and ran from the courtroom. The judge looked at my family. "Your day," she said, "will be coming." I looked at my father, Graham Ward. He was not looking at the judge. He was not looking at his crying wife or his hysterical daughter. He was looking at me. For the first time in my life, the calculation was gone from his eyes. The assessment of my value, my cost, my worth as an investment, it was all gone. In its place was something I had never seen. He was looking at me as a stranger, as an adversary, as the woman who owned his house. He saw me, finally, not as his daughter, but as the person who had, in the space of 72 hours, dismantled his entire life, and he was, quite simply, afraid. "This hearing is concluded," Judge Pham said, her gavel striking the wood with a sound like a door slamming shut. "The court will schedule the final hearing on damages and equitable relief." The final civil hearing was not a debate. It was a formality. It was the clean, quiet sound of the axe hitting the wood. The weeks between the restraining order and this final judgment had been filled with the frantic, pathetic scrambling of the guilty. Carter, in a desperate attempt to save himself, had given the district attorney everything. He provided emails, text logs, and a full, tearful confession detailing the entire conspiracy, from the off-market investment scam that had bankrupted him and Brielle, to the detailed plan Miles Rourke had engineered to use my father to steal the house. Judge Pham entered the courtroom, her face grim. She did not bother with pleasantries. She read her judgment into the record, her voice a monotone of pure, legal finality. "This court, having reviewed the uncontested evidence and the associated criminal indictments, finds the following," she stated, looking over her glasses. "First, the court affirms its preliminary finding. The last will and testament of Edison Ward is clear and binding. Ms. Delaney Ward is, and has been for 2 years, the sole and rightful owner of the property at 14 Willow Row. Her title is absolute." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for my entire life. "Second," the judge continued, "the $48,500 home equity line of credit issued by Northlake Savings, having been procured through felony forgery and conspiracy, is declared void. It is a legal nullity." The bank's lawyer half stood, but the judge waved him down. "The liability for the funds disbursed, plus all interest and associated penalties, is hereby transferred jointly and severally to the receiving and conspiring parties, Mr. Graham Ward, Mr. Carter, and the now indicted Miles Rourke. They will make the bank whole." Graham, who was sitting in the gallery, made a low, gasping sound. He was now shackled to Carter in a massive debt, a fitting punishment. "Third," the judge said, her gaze sweeping over them, "the restraining order is made permanent. Graham Ward, Margot Ward, Brielle Carter, and Carter are prohibited from contacting, harassing, or approaching within 500 feet of Ms. Delaney Ward or her minor child. Violation of this order is grounds for immediate arrest. Fourth," she concluded, "this court has transferred its findings on the perjury of Graham Ward, the admitted conspiracy of Carter, and the evidence tampering of Brielle Carter to the district attorney's office. Their criminal charges are now a matter for that jurisdiction." Brielle finally broke. It was not the theatrical, raging scream from my living room. It was a low, animal sound of despair. It was the sound of a person realizing the consequences were real. Carter, beside her, was already whispering with his lawyer, who was preparing to negotiate a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against my father. The gavel fell. The sound was like a period at the end of a very, very long sentence. It was over. Zara began packing her briefcase, a small, satisfied smile on her lips. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely light. As I turned to leave, I saw my mother. She was standing alone, abandoned. Graham was being cornered by his own lawyer. Brielle and Carter had already been pulled into a separate room. Margot was a ghost in the crowded hallway. She saw me, her face, ravaged by weeks of crying and no sleep, crumpled. She took one step toward me, her hands slightly raised in that old familiar gesture of a mother reaching for her child. "Delaney," she whispered, her voice broken. "Please, can I?" I looked at her outstretched hands, the hands that had hidden the bank letters, the hands that had known about the will, the hands that had twisted in her lap as my father called me a disgrace. I took one, deliberate step back, just out of her reach. "No, Mom," I said. My voice was not cruel. It was not angry. It was just finished. "We have to let the law come first. All the hugs will have to wait for that." I turned my back on her and walked out of the courthouse. The air outside was cool and clean. A light rain was falling, washing the city grime from the sidewalks. Zara met me on the steps, holding a small, flat box. "A closing gift," she said. I opened it. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a single, newly cut, heavy brass key. "The new high-security deadbolt," she explained, smiling. The locksmith dropped it off. "Their 24 hours of panic are over. Delaney, your 24 years of peace are just beginning." I took the key. It felt solid, real. I drove home, the key heavy in my pocket. When I let myself into the house, it was silent. Nora was at Mrs. Keaton's, safe and happy, painting. The house was mine, but it still felt wrong. The living room, where the mirror had shattered, where the champagne had popped, still felt thick with their energy. I looked up. The light? It was the light, the heavy, ornate chandelier my mother had loved, with its dim yellow-toned bulbs, cast a sickly, dated pall over everything. It was the light of secrets. I went to the hall closet. I found the box of new bulbs I had bought 6 months ago. The bright, clear, full-spectrum daylight bulbs. My father had forbidden me from installing them. "It's too cold," he'd complained. "Too harsh." I pulled out the step stool. I walked through the entire house. I went to every lamp, every ceiling fixture, every sconce. One by one, I twisted out the old, weak yellow bulbs. I replaced every single one of them with the new, bright, clear white light. When I was finished, I stood by the front door. I took a deep breath. I flipped the main switch. The house exploded in light. It was like a camera flash, sudden and absolute. Every shadow, every dark corner, every trace of the murky, yellow-tinted world they had lived in was instantly, surgically erased. The walls looked cleaner. The wood floors I had paid for looked brighter. The house was Kai Kwang. It was cleansed. When Nora ran in an hour later, she stopped in the entryway, blinking in the new brilliance. "Wow, Mommy," she giggled. "It's like daytime inside." She ran down the hall, her small feet thundering, her laughter echoing. It was the sound of a happy, safe child, in her own home. I watched her go. My promise to her finally, fully kept. I walked to the large bay window in the living room, the one that had been kept shut for years. My mother always worried about drafts. I unlatched the heavy brass locks. I put my hands on the frame and pushed. The window swung open. The scent of the rain-washed air and the damp red maple trees flooded the room. The house, after a decade of holding its breath, finally, deeply, exhaled. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Zara. DA just called. "They're charging Graham with perjury. It's officially done. Dinner tonight?" my treat. I smiled. I opened my contacts, found her name, and hit edit. I deleted Zara Cole, attorney. I typed in a new name, family, by choice. They told me I was a disgrace. They told me I was a burden, a failure. They thought they could erase me from my own life, write me out of my own home. I chose to be a mirror instead. I chose to be the one thing they could not bear to look at, the truth. I held myself up, and I forced them to see their own reflection. I am Delaney Ward. I am the owner of this house, and I will never, ever let my daughter, or myself, bow our heads to anyone again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you want to support us, hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.